Good afternoon, everybody. I hope the microphone is working this time because it wasn't in the last one here. So if you cannot hear me, please raise your hands. My name is Knut Lasse Lüth. I founded IoT Analytics about a year ago, and what we're doing is we're trying to analyze the Internet of Things regarding markets and companies. So what we're doing is market intelligence and competitive intelligence. And today I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the analysis that we have done in the last 9 months, I would say, and with a special focus on how is the Internet of Things shaping competitive forces and what are the companies that are actually working with the Internet of Things and trying to understand which are the really big companies and the big startups making the Internet of Things happen. Okay, so I want to start with an analogy. In 1994, this was the cover of the Time magazine, I think in May. Some of you maybe were not even born back then. But back then the internet was something, this is the new internet. And when we look at it 20 years later, it has created an industry with companies that were not known in 1994. And that are among the biggest companies in the world right now. This was the theme of the Harvard Business Review in November last year. And it's sort of interesting because now the topic is not the internet, now it's the internet of everything or the internet of things. And the question is again, who will dominate this internet of things in 20 years' time? And that's basically what we try to understand. We want to understand what can make companies successful in the Internet of Things and who are these companies that are making it happen. Even though it's very early right now, we can already see that some companies are really pushing hard. So very quickly, just telling you what IoT Analytics does. So what we try to do is we look at market insights and competitive intelligence in the Internet of Things. So we try to monitor sort of what markets are there, what are the segments, segment size, what is the M&A activity, what are companies actually doing. And you can have a look at this online if you want. We have some free publications on some of the topics, and what I'm presenting today is a summary of some of these. Okay, so let's get started. The first part is more about the strategic forces of the Internet of Things and how that changes competition. And what we found is that there is a natural evolution happening in the Internet of Things. For hundreds of years, things have been, I would say, dumb. And then in the 80s and 90s, things started to become digital. So they had some interfaces and they started measuring things. And so from that point on, things became connected, and some of these things are only becoming connected now. But the actual value that comes with these connected things rises as the thing matures. So at the beginning, what you mostly see is that you can start monitoring things, so you can visualize sensor data. And then at one point you can, sometimes that goes very quickly, you can also go the other way around and you can control things. You can actually change things by monitoring, basically on your screen or something. Oftentimes then you start having some algorithms, so you start to optimize, and maybe even that at one point becomes autonomous. So when we think of a car, at the beginning maybe you just start monitoring your fuel level or something. And number 6, when we're talking about the Google self-driving car, then we're talking about an autonomous car that actually does all of this by itself. And the real value we find is that really comes when the thing starts to interact with within the ecosystem and with other ecosystems. And what that means, I will show you in a quick example. How many of you know Nest? So that's round about the majority, so I would say 50 to 60%. So for those who don't know Nest, Nest is one of the early examples of the Internet of Things. It was a company that started 2009 and was acquired by Google January of 2014 for $3 billion US. And what they do is they make thermostats that are smart, as in the thermostat you can control it with your phone, and the thermostat learns what you're doing when you're home, when you go to bed, and sort of adjust everything according to that. Now, a lot of people, when I tell them that, they say, okay, why? I mean, why do I need that? What's the value of that? So when you look at it, really, it's first of all, it's really expensive. So in that sense, it's a reason not to buy the Nest. You know, it's the price is sort of, from a customer point of view, it's more expensive. So your value that you get is lower. Quality, not sure yet about the Nest. You know, it's not long on the market. I'd rather take an established thermostat. And we've heard this before in other talks, what they do advertise is that they say, okay, we're able to save you more energy than others because we have smarter algorithms. And what most of the customers really value is this sort of convenience. They don't need to change anything anymore. The things changes when they come home, when they go away. They don't need to do anything anymore. The house just knows, you know, that's the good thing. But is it enough to buy a smart thermostat in 2014 or 15? I think many of you will say no. The question then is, where will Nest, or where might Nest be going? This could be one potential path where they're going. And when you look at that graph, there are actually many more reasons why you would buy it. So in the future, it might still be more expensive than other thermostats. But what we will see is that Nest, and now they are starting to do it, and other thermostats also, are integrating with other smart home devices. And so you may not need to do one app for every device, but in the future you come home and the light goes on and the heat goes on and all the other things sort of at the same time. So there's an integration happening. Another thing that's possible, obviously, is value-added services. So for example, you want to, for example, Nest can give owners of many houses some sort of reports as to the energy usage. For some that could be interesting. But I think the really interesting part comes, Nest now has started to cooperate with utilities. So Nest is basically saying, I know the data of all the different, of many different consumers. You as a utility providing the electricity, aren't you interested in that data? And they are, because they don't have that data really, and they can start optimizing the energy supply. So for example, in the US especially, peak demand is a lot more expensive than demand that is not at the peak. So then, for example, what you could think is that every owner of a Nest device all of a sudden pays a lower energy price if they agree that they are not taking the energy at a peak demand, for example. So then you can see that this whole Internet of Things that maybe in 2014 looks, oh yeah, it's a nice connection, actually becomes, wow, the whole ecosystem has a totally different logic and has quite a lot of value to the customer. And if you put that then back on the chart that we had before, I mean, the first thermostats that was in the 1800s, then you had digital thermostats, and maybe then you have Nest somewhere there today, but it's really going on to like the cross ecosystem where you are talking to the grid, you are maybe talking to wearables, maybe to the car, and a lot of the value is actually in there. And maybe one last thing in that section, what does that mean to the industry itself? So usually when you look at an industry, and this is like a Porter's 5 forces analysis that you do in strategy, basically when you look at these different forces, when they are good for the companies in the industry, usually they make good profits. When they're bad, the industry usually doesn't make such good profits. So here you can say this thermostat industry is sort of not really that attractive. And we did our analysis of the companies we looked at was there's about a 10% EBIT margin in the companies that have been in the thermostat industry in the last 10 to 15 years. And that is due because there's lots of rivalries. it doesn't really take that much to develop your sort of dumb thermostat, but things change. With a smart thermostat, now you start seeing, for example, that when you look back at the Nest, a lot of the value of the Nest comes from the data that they have started to generate, for example, at the beginning. So Nest says, okay, we know the customer, so we can write algorithms that optimize the energy efficiency at home. So that, for example, then creates a new barrier to companies who are not in that business. The other thing is that developing such a device is actually quite costly. So you're starting to, for example, there you can see, you're starting to develop some barriers to entry that weren't there before. At the same time, the customer sort of is getting higher switching costs because the customer actually now once you have the customer locked into a Nest smoke alarm or Nest thermostat, may not be interested to buy another smart home device from another company because they are not super interoperable. So the switching costs are going up for the customer, which also means for the company that you have more power. So in the end, we might see better profits in that industry. And from a company point of view, it's really important to look at these sort of things in your industry, because any smart device in any industry will have a similar effect on the competitive forces that are going on in the industry. And then the second, so that's sort of the strategic point of view. And now to the companies that are, I would say some of them see this quite similarly. There are many ways of looking at the technology, and this is sort of the way that we have looked at it. And before I go into the actual companies to classify them, I want to show you how we do this. So in our point of view, there's the hardware level at the bottom, where you have definitely a lot of sensors, and there's many different sensors. You also always need some sort of communication hardware. Sometimes actuators, sometimes not. Processor, operating system, and I mean, this is not new. This has been there, but this is necessary for the Internet of Things. And then there's hardware development tools. Some of them you may have seen in other talks today. And that sort of makes up the hardware layer. And then on top of that, the things need to communicate. So you have the sort of different communication levels, and there's many from very short range like NFC or RFID to basically M2M via the mobile carrier network or something like that. And then there's the software level, where you have the IoT platforms, where you have the analytics happening, where you have the storage and databases. And in the end, obviously, you have the different applications. And there, it's quite interesting. You should probably differentiate between consumer Internet of Things, business Internet of Things. Everyone sort of slices and dices it differently, but the big one that's really on the left-hand side are home, smart home, wearables are sort of everything around lifestyle, and now also coming up the connected health. On the right-hand side, definitely industrial is one of those big areas. So what we measured then was, okay, which are the biggest companies sort of making the biggest buzz right now? So we measured, for example, what are people looking for? What companies are people looking for on Google when it comes to Internet of Things? What are people tweeting about when it comes to Internet of Things? So we measured these sort of things and came up with one ranking. And surprisingly, as we talked in the last talk, we talked about the company, about Intel and Intel's marketing or Intel's sort of consumer practices. They are actually on top in our ranking. And what does Intel do? Intel is obviously in processors or semiconductors. Intel has an IoT platform, and Intel has the Galileo developer for sort of the maker community. Microsoft is another one you may not believe, but Microsoft actually puts a lot of money on Internet of Things right now. They have this Azure platform, and that platform is they want to make it the IoT platform in the next years. And I mean, I saw them at CeBIT. They had basically almost one hall just for this platform. Cisco is another big company, and obviously Google is in there with Nest, and Google has also acquired a couple of other companies like Revolver or Dropcam. One company that I didn't expect in there so big is IBM, but they are also putting a lot of effort on analytics and on their IoT platform, so to say. The biggest company in this list that is German, me being German, is SAP. Unfortunately, no Austrian company in that list. The other big German companies, just to give you an idea, is Bosch is doing a lot in Germany regarding the Internet of Things. Deutsche Telekom is also doing quite a lot, and Siemens I would always expect in there, but they're not so big, I would say. So that's sort of the big companies, and when you look at the funding of the startups, that's sort of the other big question. You have lots of startups that are trying to enter this space, and we may have missed one or two of these because it's basically really hard to find all of them, and some of them are hidden, and some of them haven't disclosed how much funding they have raised. But I mean, you look at a company like Jawbone that has raised $500 million already, and that is, I mean, it's just huge. And then I look at the German and Austrian, and it's like we're talking about single-digit million, if at all. So it would be awesome to see some really well-funded startups here. But coming back to my initial slide that showed, what are going to be the big companies in the next 20 years. Hopefully, some of these, and hopefully also, and one in this bottom right corner. So. And maybe one person here in the room will be in that list in 20 years. Would be great. Okay, so my conclusion, to wrap up what we just learned. Number one, the value of the Internet of Things is more than just the connectivity. It's actually in the analytics and the algorithms that go on top and in the ecosystem. You can see the forces of IoT, industry forces are changing, and companies should probably think about how it affects their industry, whether they're in thermostats or in cars or in wherever. We are seeing a new sort of infrastructure, but new is definitely in sort of exclamation marks, because a lot of this has already been there, but the sort of thinking from the hardware to the application through, there are many different ways how this is being done right now. And as we just saw, Intel, Microsoft, Cisco, Google, and IBM are sort of the big names throwing big marketing budgets right now at the Internet of Things. I mean, these are all US companies. Same goes for the startups. There's also some really big startups coming out of that US scene. So I hope that sort of gave you good some of the competitive forces and the companies in the market. I'm open to questions now. Maybe one last thing, if you like these sort of analysis and if you're interested, we are always looking for people who want to join us or who want to help us in generating some of these insights. And apart from that, I would say thank you, and please ask me questions if you have. Okay, so the question is whether the sum of the whole presentation is that, or could be, or one could be, that the algorithm or the analytics layer is the most valuable. I probably wouldn't say it is the most valuable, and you probably should do some more analysis than just the ones we've done, but it sounds to us that the analytics do actually bring a lot of value to the Internet of Things. So analytics is the one key, probably one of the key things in the Internet of Things. Oh, you look confused? Okay. Yeah. No? Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the analytic layer of the Internet of Things is one of the most important ones that will bring a lot of the value in the Internet of Things. That's probably, I would probably agree with that. Yeah. As an IoT player in what? You can start out lean startup with nothing today and be a big company tomorrow, I would say. I don't know. I cannot answer that question. That's you need to look at that case by case. But it's definitely a big, and that's one of the. I mean, there's a recent study in Germany regarding Industry 4.0, and the outcome of that was what's the biggest thing that is sort of for companies, why they're not investing in Internet of Things right now, and the answer was the high upfront investment costs. Well, if you're a company and you are, let's say you are a car company like BMW and you want to invest in the Internet of Things, you need to basically make your car Internet of Things enabled. So you need to have hardware in there, you need to have connectivity, you need to have the backend in there, you need to connect it to some other partners, so you have, as we just saw in the last presentation, you have organizational costs, you have, the Internet of Things is not just on one layer, it's across several, and each of them it's complex, and it doesn't go from today to tomorrow. Maybe it wasn't the best example, but I think for other industries, they maybe start at a lower level. There are a couple of questions back there.
Okay. The development you suggested as feasible and maybe even desirable has this implication that people would be willing to share their rather private information with companies, with whoever, probably somebody they don't know. How do you think this reticence to give away information that is very, very private, like when I go to sleep, and so on, to somebody else? How could that be overcome?
I share your concerns, but I mean, when I think of it right now, I would say it's already happening. Think of Jawbone. People are already sharing the sleep data with Jawbone, and Jawbone is already able to make quite a lot of analysis based on that. I don't know if they have already monetized that data somehow. I'm not sure if they are wanting to, but when I see sort of the privacy concerns, and specifically here in Central Europe, we are very concerned. I see in probably other countries not so. Yeah, I mean, I think what we're seeing right now is that there's a lot of talk, but when it comes down to sharing the data, the majority of people doesn't think about it and just does it. But it doesn't. I don't support that, but I think that's what I'm seeing happening right now.
Do you think that people are aware of going on?
Are people aware of IoT?
No.
I don't know. I cannot answer that. I don't know if people are aware of the information going out. Yeah. Please. So the question is, there are many IoT platforms right now. How will they consolidate over the next years? I have the same observation as you. Every company that's in Internet of Things somehow is saying also we have an IoT platform. I'm not sure how that consolidation works. I don't even know if there's a consolidation necessary. The consolidation needs to happen, I guess, in the standards that these platforms use. So I mean, the standards the standards need to be talking to each other. You need to be able to have different devices in at least in one ecosystem be talking to each other. And so in the end, these platforms need to enable that. But I'm not sure if the platforms themselves need to consolidate. So the question is there, tell me if I rephrase correctly, is there a risk in having all of our devices being updated frequently for security updates and so on, and having basically being reliant on the cloud updation, or however you want to call it? I mean, what's going to happen is the same thing that's happening with your smartphone right now, that it's updating regularly. So the same thing will happen to devices. I haven't been in the sort of security talks, and I think there were a couple, but it's definitely going to be a big issue that things can be hacked, so there will be a new reality, and I probably also think that there will be an event at one point where a cybersecurity breach will break down a house or a power plant or whatever, and it'll lead, and we'll have some big discussion at one point. How can we make the security even more secure? But I think we cannot avoid that. That's going to be the new reality, that things are more vulnerable than they were before, and we need to try, as we do with software on computers and smartphones, we need to try to make them as secure as possible, but there will always be loopholes, and then we need to improve on those loopholes. Okay. How many more questions we got? Yeah. Yeah. Forecasters don't really have there is no one forecast that everyone agrees on. I think what most people agree on is that the industry or the business side is going to be bigger than the consumer side. Like 60-40 is sort of the split that I have in my mind. Then the other thing is about timing. Right now you're seeing smart home as like one of the forefront, like the front runners sort of, whereas in some of the industrial spaces, we're talking about predictive maintenance everywhere as like one of the big industrial cases, but when you look really where is this being implemented, very, very like it's like this slim. So in the end, probably the business side bigger. Right now, the consumer side has the hype and has sort of the momentum going for it. So the question is, will players from the consumer side move to the business side? And that's a really interesting one, because Microsoft is trying to do that. Microsoft has a couple of, I believe, Microsoft is a consumer company to me. They do have Microsoft Dynamics, and so they do have some sort of system on the business side, but they're mainly a consumer side, and they're trying to push some of these things now into the business world. There's a nice video of a Microsoft equipping a Jeep Wrangler automotive plant with their sort of whole equipment to make that Internet of Things. And I think you also cited one in your talk. Was it Microsoft and ThyssenKrupp? Yeah, okay, with elevators. So yes, I think that's another threat to the business side, that the consumer side is starting to look at that as well. Okay, thank you.